Welcome everyone. I'm Wendy for FamilySearch. I'm joining from downtown Salt Lake City. And those of you who have watched live streams before, please post in the comments where you're joining from and if you notice anything different about my office. And we are here with Stephen Valentine, which is just absolutely thrilling. Tell us where you're calling from.
I am in Centerville. We just sold our house about a month ago, so we're in an apartment.
Isn't it great?
So cozy.
Do you love tiny living?
You know, I love not doing any yard work right now. It's been pretty awesome. So much more time.
You know what? It's really made me rethink my Costco addiction because you have to carry everything like, I don't know, do you have to like carry stuff in an elevator or upstairs?
We're up 3 flights of stairs.
Yes. It just makes me kind of rethink the whole bulk living. Okay, so I'm getting confirmations that people are joining us and we're just absolutely thrilled. Okay, so Stephen, will you tell us, tell us like what you do at FamilySearch and maybe just a little personal detail, like what you do for fun.
Sure. Well, so I have been with FamilySearch now for about 23 years. So it's been pretty awesome. And, we'll have to ask the audience later on if anybody remembers doing research off of microfilm. That might be a term that most people don't even know what I'm talking about when I say microfilm. But yeah, back in the dark ages, right, is when I started on. So I've been in a lot of different areas. It's been a lot of fun. And right now I work with what we call our engagement efforts, our outreach efforts. And so our wonderful Wendy here is on our team, the rock star that she is.
Oh, thank you. I'm just so glad I get to do this and talk to people and our viewers. Yeah, tell us a little bit about what's in the engagement division.
Yeah, so a lot of kind of fun things that really touch the public. So all of our marketing team, of which Wendy is part of, and that includes like the emails you're getting, these wonderful personalized messages, like our Memorial Day campaign. I hope a lot of you got that. That was a lot of fun. And so all of our marketing functions, the Family History Library is part of that, our wonderful facility there, as well as our regional centers, which we have all over the place. And then our partnerships, we work with a lot of partners around the world, like Ancestry, MyHeritage, Find My Past. And so we work with all of those partners. And then a bunch of our business development efforts as we're looking at kind of new technologies for family history. And then just a lot of miscellaneous stuff that comes our direction. So, but I started with marketing because they're the cool kids in school, right? They were at the cool table. So I always want to associate with them first.
I like that. And, that is a huge, large group. And let me ask you this question. When you first started at FamilySearch, like what was the cool technology or the cool thing that everyone was excited about 23 years ago?
Yeah. So, okay, believe it or not, they were right when I hired on, they were so excited because the 1880 US Census just came out on compact disc. And it was like 50 discs in a great big like binder that they sold. And everybody was going crazy because we finally had this index out on compact disc.
Wow.
This was about 3 years before we had anything online. We didn't have an internet site yet. We had no digital technology yet. And so, yeah, those were some interesting times. So
that does anyone have that anywhere?
Those CDs?
Yeah.
I actually keep a drawer of all that stuff.
You do?
I have like a little shrine to the past. And it's pretty fun. I like that. So
let us know in the comments like where you guys are joining from and if you remember those days early on where information was delivered differently. And now if you were to compare what you're excited about 23 years later, and we're going to talk a lot about this, but just as we get going, what are you excited about happening at FamilySearch that you can share with those watching? Technology-wise or anything?
It'd be fun to hear some memories in the comments of what it was like in the pre-digital era, right? The hours and hours of time that it spent to find information about your family and stuff. Yeah, exactly.
And going to archives, like people were dedicated. It's so inspiring.
We had on the second floor of the library, the busiest portion of the Family History Library was the second floor in the corner, and it's where we kept all of the microfilm for the US censuses. And we had these huge book indexes. And some of you will remember this. They were really bad and incomplete, and you would pour through these indexes, go find the microfilm, load it on, try to find the name. These are unindexed, right? In the film, you would spend hours and then say, well, where did they move 10 years later? And then they would, this would be days of work. And now that area doesn't even exist in the library. It's just
Cool.
all gone. So it's been a fun change.
I heard someone describe the technology that exists on a smartphone as the same that exists more than what existed on a college campus in the 70s and 80s.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. And so if you think about that, anyway, okay, so we have a lot of things that we're going to talk about today. And like I said, we're thrilled that everyone is here joining us, and we're getting messages that people can see and hear.
That's good, because we've had some technical problems today.
Some technical problems. It's just the way things work. And Stephen, I think there's a couple of things that I would love for you to speak about, and then we would love to take questions from people towards the second half. So if you have a question for Stephen, we will kind of pull from those what we can. But let's just get started. Like tell us what you want to talk to us about today.
Would it be okay if I started with a little story?
Yes. Right? Yes. Oh, we love stories. Please.
Okay. So Wendy's running my slides because of the multitude of technical problems that we've had today.
Yes. And here I'm
bring up that slide that shows those handsome people doing some metal detecting. That's it right there. All right. So this is if you can see that through the stream. This is a picture of my dad is the guy in the middle here that's looking very skeptical. And this is my, don't go forward. Go back.
Oh, sorry.
You're advancing.
I'm advancing. Here we go.
Spoil it. My wife is looking on. Are you seeing that there? All right. So this house in this picture is up in Brigham City, Utah. And this particular plot of land has been in my family since the 1870s. And my dad grew up in that house, and then he built a house right next door to it. And he's 89, and he spent almost his whole life right here in this plot of ground. And so I thought it would be pretty fun to go up and do some metal detecting and find out, what could we find in a piece of land that had been in my family's possession for so long. And so we were out doing some metal detecting, and my son and my dad thought this whole thing was like voodoo science or something. You can see it just the way he's standing there. He doesn't buy any of this, right? And so that was, it was kind of fun. But we did start finding some kind of cool things down in the ground. So if you go to the next slide.
Okay, and here we go.
So that is a coin that was buried down in the ground. And my great grandfather had a sheep business, and this was some currency that they used back in those days. And so that's kind of cool. Valentine and Brown, and on the back side that you can't see there, it says good in trade 12.5 cents is what it says on the back of that coin. I'm holding it here in my, I don't know if you can only see the slide right now.
Yes. They can see you when you hold it up top.
So this is the coin that I'm holding, right here in my hand. So there was some fun stuff that we found out there in the dirt. But as we're going along, my son got a pretty good ping as he was detecting. And there was a lot of scrap metal and things in this ground. So we dug down. This was probably this far down. This was kind of buried down in there quite a ways. So we get down into it, and we start pulling out this piece of metal. And it just, again, looked like junk metal. It just looked like scrap. In fact, we went and we tossed it in a pile. But my friend that was with us, he rushed over and says, "No, wait a minute. I think I know what that is. Let me see it." And it was this piece of metal right here.
Okay, yeah, hold that still so people can see
that. Is that coming through?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this was the piece of metal. And if I ever share this, I asked people if they can figure out what that is. And not very often do we get the answer. I didn't know what it was, but what it was is it's a piece of a harmonica. And I thought, well, that's interesting that there would just be a piece of harmonica down there. Well, at that point, my dad came rushing over, who'd, again, been standing on the sideline very skeptically the whole time. He comes rushing over and says, let me see that. And he kind of takes it like it's this precious artifact in his hands. And why don't you go to the next slide?
Okay.
And the one after that. One more, I think. There we go. So he starts telling me about his brother, Paul.
Oh.
And his brother Paul was born back in the 1914. And when Paul was born, they found out pretty clearly that he had some handicaps, and he could never speak, and he couldn't read, but he loved music, and he would carry around a harmonica and play that harmonica, and he loved the feel of it. And so this was one of his harmonicas that he dropped 80 years ago or 90 years ago that buried its way down to the dirt. And so, to you, this was just a meaningless piece of metal. But to my dad, this is a link to a brother who died in the 1940s. And for me, it opened up a whole vista of stories, and let's look at the photos, and let me learn everything I can learn about this uncle that died well before I was born. And so to me, this is like my most precious, we moved to the apartment. I made sure that I kept this with me. This didn't go in a box, right? Yeah. This stays on the shelf right next to me. And this is a precious, artifact for me. And I share that because our past and our family and our memories are so often only found in maybe a scrap of paper, or maybe a single photo, or maybe a piece of metal is that link to the past that we have. And so those are precious, and perhaps the most precious thing to a family. How can we capture and preserve those forever? Let me just tell one more very quick one. If you go to the next slide, my grandfather, this is the father, well, that's a close up on that harmonica. Yeah, you kind of zoom in there and kind of see that piece of metal.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Kind of cool. Okay. But Paul's dad, my dad's father, he was not much of a journal keeper. And so my dad, towards the end of his life, was really pushing him, Dad, please write down your history. And I'm sure a number of your guests have talked about this, right? The importance of journaling, the importance of your story, right? And so he kept pushing my dad, please write something down. And this is what he got. So go to the next slide. There's my grandpa. Sorry, I can't, since I don't have the slides, I can't remember the order. Okay, here we go. Okay, here it is. His entire life history is in 6 pieces of paper that look like this. That's all we got. And if you kind of glance, it says things like school. There's something that talks about a runaway train, a trip to Yellowstone, watercress. What do these things mean? They were prompts. They were memory prompts to him. So he would remember his story, and he could tell it, or he could write down. But he died before he could tell it. In fact, these strips of paper were tucked inside a jacket after my grandpa died that my dad was going to take to like a Goodwill type of a place. And luckily, right before he dropped it off, he reached in and he pulled out those scraps of paper, or that would have been it. So sometimes all we know is contained on a few scraps of paper, or maybe on a piece of metal. So I share that because that is our mission at FamilySearch. Our mission is to go around the world and preserve these priceless documents and records before they're gone forever. Because, in so many cases, the only evidence of someone's life might be found on that one piece of paper. And if it's gone, that memory could be gone forever. So it's precious. It's so invaluable that we have to get out there. And we're literally racing, Wendy, against the clock.
Yes. I'm going to ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
And about that, because this is something that I've heard you speak about multiple times. What does it mean to you in your sort of position, and you as an individual, to think about all of the stories that are being lost around the world? Like, how does that feel? And
it's heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it really is heart-wrenching. And I mean that I think that these are not documents to me. These are people, and particularly back in time, we are so used to recording every aspect of our life and having so much evidence of our life. That was not the case for your grandparents and great-grandparents. Some people still have some photos or some documents. For so many people, they have nothing. And you go back to the next generation, and if it's not for the things that are sitting in an archive or at a church someplace, you don't have any way to connect. with the past. I tried to write a whole biography on a great-great-grandmother, and I had one letter from her. That's it. And it was a letter to a brother, and I reconstructed her whole life, but I had to use histories about the time period, about the place she lived, right? All because there was nothing about her. I had to build it around her. So yeah, I mean, I think that's why all the way since 1894, FamilySearch has been doing this, because of how valuable, how precious that it is.
And I love what you're saying about everyone. And I think oftentimes we think about, and we've talked about this before on our live streams, that we think our life is ordinary. And we think, but even if you just think in the time that you've been at FamilySearch from the technology standpoint, and we've got a lot of people commenting about waiting for the mail to arrive and having records sent that way, and microfilm.
Yes. Oh yes, I'm glad we have some people out there that remember. Thank you so much.
And but people's stories are so important, and just the fact that you had that ancestor with the 6 strips of paper, and that just becomes so precious. My father, I think there's 30 photos from his childhood, and those 30 photos are so compelling because there's so few, right? And we have photos are now ephemeral. They are throwaway. So it's just fascinating. And I think something that would be helpful for people to understand is what this is like around the world. So let's go to
it's kind of fun to talk about some of the obstacles that are, when I say we're racing the clock, we really are. And the reason is because so much, and you can just kind of skip past these here, Wendy. So we'll just pause here for a second. We talk about the challenges that we face. And there's some kind of big categories of challenges. And one of them is just the fact that these records are housed in buildings, and those buildings oftentimes themselves are at risk. And if you go to the next slide there.
And tell us what we're looking at here.
So this is a county archive in Georgia. And this was just in the last 10 years. So we're not talking ancient history here of things burning down. This is a modern example of a county archive, and they lost everything in this fire. All those records were gone. And so, if your ancestor, that record you're looking for was inside that building, what a heartbreak. Now, fortunately, we had been in that very building back in the 70s, and we had microfilmed all their birth, marriage, death, genealogical records out of that archive. And so we were able to restore the records back to them. That we had kept in our Granite Mountain Record Vault on microfilm and have later now digitized. But that's an example. Another example that was in the news recently. You might remember all the typhoons in the Philippines.
Yes.
Right, and it just came through, and it just devastated. And I think maybe let's go to the next slide might be an example of that. Now, I'm sorry, I'm a little out of order because I can't see my slides, but I'll come to that one in a minute. Okay. But in this case, I think these next few, they talk about just the condition of the record. So these pictures that you're seeing here, these are actual records in actual archives. Now, can you imagine walk in and the record that you need is in that stack? Those things, if you go back one slide, this one in the DR Congo was an interesting one. As we pulled the documents out of these files, they just disintegrated, and the termites were running out of them. So these are the kind of conditions. Now, there are many archives that are in great shape, and there's national level archives that they do a great job, but we're all over the world, and the records of your family are all over the world. And too often, whether it's just deterioration, whether it's natural disaster, whether it's just the age of these records. I have a letter from a great grandfather that I found in the last couple of weeks, and just handling it a little bit, it's starting to fall apart on me.
Because they're precious. They're not made to, people didn't do things on archival papers and things like that.
These records, keep in mind when these were created, they never thought about us. They didn't think anybody was going to ever need to look at them again. They were created for a specific legal purpose. Document a birth, document a marriage, or a church kind of ceremony. They weren't thinking of us needing to use them hundreds of years later. So it's a miracle that they even exist at all, don't you think?
Yes, it is. It is. Okay, so this slide that we're looking at, These are the piles that you talked about. And
Yeah,
then,
this next one is kind of a stunner.
oh my goodness.
So this was in Italy, and I love the look on that guy's face. Kind of tells the whole story.
I'm lost. I give up.
He's just overwhelmed. You know, we've had instances before where we have found garbage bags out in the back of buildings, and if you kind of look in them, they're filled up with vital records because they don't have the funds to do anything with them. So, you know, when we come in with our digital cameras and we offer we not only do we take the pictures, but we preserve them. We we'll flatten them out, we'll clean them up, we'll put them back in archival paper, folders and so forth, and then we'll digitize and preserve them forever. And they can't believe that we'll come in and do that for free. Yeah. But our purpose is just simply to make these available so that people can have these kinds of discoveries, so that these records, like you're seeing here, don't, disappear forever.
Yes. Okay. I think these are very compelling images that paint a very poignant picture about what things are like internationally and locally. And so this is a reminder, friends that are watching, like, records are precious, and be thinking about the records of your life and how you're documenting.
Well, and I think that's the key. The message that I'd like to give more than anything is find those documents that you do have, and please preserve them. Mm-hmm. My daughter-in-law was asking me last week. She goes, "I've got all these journals from high school. I think I'm just going to throw them away." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You've got to keep those. You got to digitize them. Your kids are going to love those, right?"
Those are going to be gems, collector's items. She might want to rip out a few pages or redact a few things. But...
And maybe she doesn't dare give them to her kids, but her grandkids will love them.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so
this picture here is of one of these churches I was talking about in the Philippines.
Okay. And
that was the day after. You see that complete devastation.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
You see that's the exact same church before and after photo. And so yeah, we just never know when these records will no longer be available. The other thing though is we also have the issue that some of the content that we really need is not written at all, but it's just in people's heads, right?
Yes.
And you're a huge proponent of oral recording of those stories, right, Wendy?
It's easy because everyone speaks, right? Most, and it's so easy with your phone is I do a lot of audio journaling personally, because it's very easy for me. And that's the goal. That's the intent. Find what works for you and just start with something, right?
Right. And that's the most natural. We're all wired to talk, not necessarily to write, but we are definitely wired to talk. And Wendy, some more than others. I mean, some have the gift, but
yes.
But I think as we do that, it's so natural to just start telling stories. Mm-hmm. And if you go on here, one of the next ones that we'll talk about is this idea of the lack of written records. Mm-hmm. So in Africa, it's an oral tradition. Mm-hmm. And there, in many cases, they don't have written records. And so what do they have? They have village elders. Oh. And these village elders can remember 10, 12, 15 generations of their family. Wow. And and so the saying goes there is when the village elder dies, the town library burns down.
Oh, that is so tragic.
And so we've had an effort now for the last about 5 to 6 years, and we've really accelerated in the last 2 to 3 years to go across Africa and to capture as many of these histories as we can. So we're in the villages with audio recorders, with these village elders, and we're just recording their stories, and we're recording their genealogies, what they can remember about their family, and then we bring them back and we type them up into it'll look like some group sheets, some family sheets, and then we go back and we verify it with them to make sure that it's accurate. Now they have a record, and we have a record forever for the world. This guy here, I think there's maybe a little bit more information on the slide. If you want to just click that one more time. Yeah, so he could remember. One more back. He could remember 12 generations. So he was in his late 80s, which is really rare in Africa. And the interviewer had gone to him and done the interview, and then they came back the next day. They just wanted to give him a copy of it, and he died in the night. And so we were able to give his family that history.
Oh my gosh.
Which was incredible, because again, had we even been one more day, we would have lost it. those
Oh,
generations would have been lost, even a day. So yeah, every day is precious. So
yes.
that's a fun project we're doing across Africa right now to try and capture. And we're looking at the Polynesian cultures that
Mhm.
also have strong oral traditions, and in other areas where we can capture those oral stories. So that's a big challenge. Is when all you have is what you know, please document it. Please share those stories. And
Okay.
we have a memories app where you can do that as well, right?
Yes, it's so easy. And I think this is something that's interesting too, right? Like what does this look like, the time and cost to provide access to people? Talk to us about this.
So, again, this is like the ancient of days, right?
Yes.
Showing you, that's an old microfilm camera. We started in 1938 doing microfilming. And, but, the cost, it was so slow to capture the images. And then indexing, it took us 17 years to index the 1880 US Census. 17 years. The one that went out on those compact discs.
Yes.
When we did the Ellis Island database, it took us 7 years.
Okay.
By contrast, when we indexed the 1940 US Census, it took us about 3 months.
And that's like earlier than anyone projected even, right?
Right. So I hope that maybe there's some on the stream today that helped us index those.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
are indexing any of our records. And if so, thank you so much. Because it's because of you that we've been able to provide this access. And we have over 300,000 volunteers that are indexing. And over the internet now, instead of off of microfilm and CDs. And so these have been some of these breakthroughs. And I think you had a live stream with John Alexander the other day, and he talked a little bit about some of those breakthroughs, right?
And now, like, not only you can edit the indexed records, and I want to second what you said about this. The community that cares about genealogy and family history is a giving community, and they care not only about their own story, but other people's story. And, the examples of what you just talked about indicate that level of commitment to each other. And, we just really appreciate, we see these volunteers, we see these, like you mentioned, indexers and people who are willing to jump in and to help. And it's really, really moving. And it's a fantastic industry to be a part of.
Well, FamilySearch is, we've done a lot, but honestly, we couldn't have done any of this without the volunteers. Mm-hmm. Every success, everything that we get online is all because of our wonderful volunteers. And so, people will ask us, how can we give back? Well, you're doing it all the time. And every time you come on and you add a story or you add a photo, that's giving back and helping other people to find there. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for helping. Thank you for indexing, and anything that you do. Every contribution matters.
And we've got a couple people on here. We've got Lynn Nielsen, who indexed both Ellis Island and the 1940 census, and she remembers the paper days. So way to go, Lynn, and everyone else.
Thank you, Lynn. That is incredible.
Okay, what else are we going to? Oh, this is also interesting.
So another quick little story here. So just to talk about how precious these documents are, but how fragile they are, and how easy it is to lose them. So my uncle passed away a couple months ago, and he had been living in my grandma's house, and he kind of inherited some of the stuff from my grandma, and nobody knew where that stuff went, right? It just all vanished.
Disappeared.
Yeah, like it oftentimes does. So when my uncle died, he was very poor. He'd been living in a trailer house, didn't have many possessions. So they just kind of threw a lot of it away. And there was a tomato box. And that's what you're seeing here. It was a tomato box. And it just had a bunch of random stuff thrown in there. And you see there's like, I don't know if you can see it. There's some cross, like needle point, things. There's some
berries.
Those McCulls. What are those like?
Sewing patterns.
Yeah. So there's just a bunch of junk thrown in there. And so my dad was going to throw it in the garbage. And luckily, before we did, we opened it up and we kind of dug down underneath, and it was a gold mine of old like letters and some photos. If you go to the next image, there was even halfway down a picture of me.
Who would throw that away?
That cute kid there was me. And I just wanted to share, if it's okay,
yes,
a little bit of this one letter that I found inside that box. And this is pretty cool. So I'll just turn that around. So I mean, it's amazing that these things, it's this incredibly thin, brittle paper. You're a paper expert. You probably know exactly, what that is. But it's from 1909, and this is a letter from my mother's father. My grandma's father. So my great grandfather. He was in England serving a mission, and he was writing home to his family. So he's a missionary. He's got a bunch of young kids at home. And 1909. So this is really interesting, and this is what it says. It says, it seems as though all over the state of Utah, is nothing but typhoid in all the papers. I get that there is deaths and more getting sick, which is alarming. Now, isn't that interesting as we're going through our COVID-19, right? That back in this was before the Spanish influenza even, that they were going through one of these huge challenges. He says, there are deaths and more getting sick, which is alarming. I do hope that there will not be any more of it in the family. And I don't think there will be, for I believe that God will help us when we are in need and has blessed us in numerous ways. Well, just randomly finding this letter right at the time when we're going through all of this. And by the way, in 1918, one of my aunts died from the Spanish flu in this same family. So they went through many of these trials, but just to read about, an ancestor going through a similar time as me 100 years ago, that brought me a tremendous amount of connection and comfort. They made it through. They found a way to stay together as a family and hold on to the things that were really important to them and find hope and joy. And what a great message from something that could have been thrown in the garbage in a tomato box, right?
Okay. Before we take questions, and so if you have questions for Stephen, we've got a couple, please post them. And we really appreciate the interaction with the viewers and especially those that are answering questions. I have a question for you, Stephen. Yeah. So as you're talking about kind of the things that you've discovered and found and connected to a lot of these physical things, what do you hope people remember about you?
Interesting. Well, that's a tough question. Why did you have to give me a tough question like that?
Personal, and I think we all want to know, because the last 23 years, you've helped the world be remembered, right? And you appreciate and understand the value of the precious things that connect us. So what do you want people to remember you for?
Yeah, well, thanks for, I think it's a few things. First off, I'm a big journaler. I love to keep a journal. I've kept a journal for a long time. I talk a lot about my own personal faith. My faith in God, I would be something. And then, my own family, of course. But then I think also just even some of the little hobbies that I have. I like to write fiction. I published a book a couple of years ago, which has been fun.
That's awesome.
I'd like to have, some, that as a heritage to my family, that, being able to achieve some life goals. But it's like all of you. It's your family, it's your faith that you believe in. I think it's how much I've loved this job. I'd love to be remembered because I feel like that every day we're able to help people to connect with their family. It's something that they hold dear, and nothing else. And now, Wendy, I have 6 grandkids, and there's nothing better. I'm telling all of you out there, if you don't have grandkids yet, hang on, because they're the best. And it makes everything all worthwhile to get to the grandkids. A lot of you know what I'm saying.
Yes. I cannot wait till grandkids. And I love that I talk about journaling, because I think that's a really important practice. And okay, so we've got some specific questions from our viewers, and then we will come back and invite you to kind of like give a closing message. Yeah. But Tiffany is asking, she has a church ledger that's from the early 1900s that's falling apart.
Wow.
She keeps it tucked away. What do we recommend? Like, do we recommend that she try to restore it herself, or what do we do with physical records like that?
Well, I have one of those too, and I'm in the same state because I don't want to let go of it, right? Even though I probably should. In fact, we might have to edit this out so the church history department doesn't hear this. Can we strike this? So what I've done is I've actually digitized each page of that book.
Okay, so you've done it. And you can, there's books, there's book scanners when the library's open. That's something for people.
And local family history centers, some of the bigger ones will have those. But even just using your phone is not a bad idea.
Mhm.
And there are some pretty good apps. I know those ledgers are big.
Mhm.
I think that anything you can do, even if you broke it into a couple of pictures, anything you can do to preserve that, because that paper will eventually disintegrate. And whatever we do, I've got one sitting on my shelf just over here across from me. And the only thing that makes me feel better about it is that the contents are digitized.
Digitized. So the recommendation is, at a minimum, digitize it with your own technology. And then there's large family history centers where you can go and do that.
If you're near one of those, if this is if this is something you really want to be kind of preserved forever, the church history library that's associated with our church would love to take it as well, and they would preserve it.
Okay, and we will make sure our moderators put a link to that in the comments. Yeah. And I have another question. This is the grandmother's. This is from Nancy. Her grandmother's collection was microfilmed by the Tennessee State Library.
Oh, great.
And the archive. So it's been microfilmed, but where should she keep the original materials? Should she pass them down to her family? Should she turn them over to a historic facility? What is, I guess, kind of similar to the other question, but what's your recommendation for someone with—
These are personal papers that were microfilmed. Is that right?
Yes.
Well, since they're microfilmed, my personal, and I'm not speaking for FamilySearch now. This is my personal view. Since it's already been preserved, I think that would be a cherished, memento to keep within your family at this point.
Yeah.
Your family should cherish that forever. And since it's been microfilmed, that means it's also been digitized, because all those films are now being converted. So you won't have to worry about them being lost. They'll be preserved. And then that just seems like a great family heirloom. From now, if they weren't, then I would, of course, say get them filmed, get them digitized, share them as much as possible. But also, some of those would be great things, if you haven't already done so, to put into the family tree. And in the memories, you can upload documents as PDFs or just as images, and then you can attach those right to the people. I've done a lot of I'm putting all these letters that I've been quoting to you. I've been uploading them into the tree to my grandparents. So
and we've talked about like how that's kind of a gift for people to discover when they come to FamilySearch, which is a big reason why we do what we do, so people can find out stuff about their family. And someone is asking about journaling. And do you do a notebook? Journaling notebook? What's your journaling?
For me, I am a really fast typist, and I'm a really slow and sloppy writer.
Okay.
So I type everything, and then I insert photos and I insert documents and mementos and stuff right in there, and then I will print off those. As you know, Wendy, there's a lot of services where you can print your own books.
Yes.
And so at the end of the year, I try to get those printed off, and then you can share them with your family, and then you get an electronic copy as well if you want to use that in that way. So that's me, because I can type really fast, but I can't write very fast.
Yes.
So
that's the thing. Do whatever method works best. And for someone was asking about audio journaling, I use my voice memo on my phone, and then if it's important, I can get it transcribed. But right now, it's just important to document, I think.
Well, on that note, last night I called my mom, and I was asking her some questions about her dad. And because I knew I couldn't remember this very well, I had my phone, and I just went into the Apple QuickTime on my Mac and turned on an audio recording, and I had her on speakerphone, and it just recorded her stories as she talked. And it saves it in the perfect format. You can upload it into the tree or anywhere you want to share it. So I think, every time you call a relative, you should probably record. Maybe you want to tell them first.
Maybe you want to ask permission. So.
You probably better ask permission, but it's such an easy way to record, those stories, get those audio files just while you're talking on the phone.
I love that. And I love that this is a conversation, that we're having, because we oftentimes think about going back, and that's important, right? And that's a big mission of FamilySearch, but it's also important to, to record yourself. And somebody is asking, I think we have a super fan, and they want to know the name of the book that you wrote.
Well, that's got to be a member of my family out there. So I don't know if the book is called The Lazarus Game.
The Lazarus game. And I bet you can Google, well, maybe, go to Amazon and you can look up Stephen.
Go to Amazon, you can. See, now it feels like it's a commercial, so I feel bad about that.
You can say that, you're a fan from the live stream. And we've got, just as I'm looking at these comments too, what's awesome is there are people, and we talked about the community, but there are people who are jumping in and answering questions that people have. So I just really appreciate this. Okay, as we wrap up, what do you want to say to all the people that are watching or are going to watch about, what FamilySearch is doing and what we care about, and maybe just a personal message from you?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you so much for the opportunity just to share and be part of this. And thank you so much. And particularly thanks for all those who've joined. Mm-hmm. And that's really, I think, where my message is. We're doing a lot of stuff right now with advanced technology. So we're using handwriting recognition technology to start reading the records in a more advanced way. We're using, you talked about some of your other live streams, some of this advanced technology. But at the end of all of that, it comes down to us. It comes down to the people. And it comes down to each person and what they can contribute. And I want to just share just one last little story of an individual that I met down in Provo, Utah. She was one of our indexers. She was one of our super indexers. And I've worked with our indexers for many, many years. And it was one of my first jobs. And I love our volunteers. And her daughter was there. She was in a wheelchair, and her daughter was there with her. And she was in this meeting because she's indexed over 100,000 records every year for the last decade. I mean, one person. It's incredible. Every year, at least 100,000 records. And so I was thanking her, and her daughter said, well, let me tell you a little bit about my mom. She says, about 10 years ago, my dad died. Mm-hmm. And mom said, what's the point of me going on? I would just rather just go on because I'm lonely and I can't do much. And so a friend of her invited her to index, and she says, I can't index. There's no way I could do this. And she was taught how to index. And from that day on, she says, every single day I get up in the morning, and that's what keeps me going. So she has had for the last 10 years MS. And she can only type with these two fingers. And she types over 100,000 records a year, one keystroke at a time. I love her. Mm-hmm. And I love all of our wonderful volunteers that do so much. Every photo, every story, every name matters. Every contribution that you add to the tree or you index or that you share on social media, every one of them matter. That's my message, is please keep sharing. Please keep contributing, because you never know. I'm sure that this wonderful person with her two fingers found one of the names that you've been looking for. I mean, she's done so many records. She didn't think that her life had meaning, and she's done nothing but help people for the last 10 years. So thank you is my message. Please keep contributing in the way that you are, and we can't do it without you. So thank you so much.
Oh, I love that. And it's just so meaningful to think about the sacrifices that everyone is doing. And I feel like, it's very inspiring. And I know all of us at FamilySearch, we feel like it's really a gift to work with the people we work with and on the cause we work with. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Stephen. And keep sharing your story, keep unearthing the story, keep trying to find your story, and know that we are here with you and we are listening, and we want to support you and continue commenting. You can reach out. There's lots of ways to get in touch with us that we've talked about if you have requests or if you need help with anything. And we will be back next Wednesday with someone from the library, and we're going to talk about some research stuff. But Stephen, what a wonderful time. I just really appreciate your message. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a joy. Thanks, everybody.